I'm James Atkinson. I'm one of the England World Fly Fishing team members. I'm here today with Sean Brooks, a fellow England team member, and we're starting to prepare ourselves for the upcoming World Championships, which is going to be in Idaho Falls, USA this year. We've also got the qualifiers for next year's World Championships running, so we fished 2 weekends across the year at 4 different venues. One of those venues this year is going to be Press Manor Fisheries, which is where we're at today. So we're here to try and figure out kind of rough methods, rough flies, get a bit of practice in with some distance casting and various other things that are hopefully going to try and give us an edge in those competitions. So hopefully we'll be able to point out a few things along the way that, even if you're not comp anglers yourselves, will be able to help you with your own fishing and try and put a few more fish on the bank.
Okay, so as comp anglers, we spend a lot of time practicing, and what that consists of is us running through different methods and getting an understanding of what's going to catch a fish the quickest and be most suited to obviously the venue. And that's the other thing, is the venue gives you time on the water to understand the venues that you're fishing as well.
So I think in my experience, competition fishing has really been the making of me, really. I think before I entered competitions, ironically actually one of the first competitions I ever fished was here at Press Manor with Bernie, but my fishing beforehand was very one-dimensional. I liked fishing dries and nymphs, and I could fish a certain way, but getting into the competition has really kind of elevated my angling to understand different methods, how to fish flies differently, think more about presentation. You can't just move and do what you want on a competition day. You've got to work to figure out, right, I'm stuck in this spot for half an hour. How am I going to get another fish? How am I going to get 2 more fish? How can I get more than the person who's coming next after me? And that kind of thought process has really allowed me to push on and catch a lot of fish and really enjoy my competitions. But for me, I think the best bit about competition fishing is definitely the social aspect. And me and Sean are really good friends, and we wouldn't have been friends if it wasn't for competition fishing. That's how we met. And if you take it seriously enough and you want to, then you can fish all over the world. Like, I've been lucky enough to fish pretty much in every continent now. Most of that through competition fishing. And a lot of my friends, and some of the best weekends of this year for me will be going away and fishing competitions like the EPP, which is the qualification rounds for the World Championships, and going away to the Worlds and seeing a group of guys who I've not seen since the previous year normally. So there's that aspect to it as well as the fishing. So definitely highly recommend having a go at comp fishing if you haven't yet.
Okay, so since I started competition fishing, I noticed that my angling was improving tenfold. Not just in my own ability, but also surrounding myself by the right people who have fished at really high level. So a lot of my fishing was always around them sort of people, and I'm sure over time you sort of become a sponge and soak that up. And here I am now, fishing a World Championships, and I never thought that would ever happen to me. So this year's my 4th one. So never say never.
So here at Press Manor today, we've got a bit of a mix of conditions. Unfortunately, the weather forecast hasn't been our friend this week. It wasn't supposed to rain much, but it has. So the water is a little bit coloured. There's quite a bit of fresh water gone into the lake, which is probably going to kind of make the fish go a bit slower. The water temperature is quite cold. It's 5 degrees currently, so the fish aren't going to be very active in what they're doing. So we started out with a more kind of what I would describe as a positive approach, trying to get a reaction out of the fish rather than appealing to their feeding nature, perhaps. So I started out here. This is a Snowy Spectre intermediate line. It's a fast intermediate, so between 1.75 and 2 inches per second. And I've gone for a mix of minky patterns to start with, as quite mobile patterns that I can search through the water, try and get a reaction out of the fish and kind of feel my way into the session, rather than going in with the slow approaches where we're going to have long periods of time with no interest. So we'll start with that and see how we go, and then maybe try some more natural methods as the day warms up. We're effectively fishing to fish at the minute that aren't natural fish. They don't know what proper food is. They don't know how to behave properly. Like, they're rainbow trout, they're not even indigenous to this country. So the kind of way to approach them is more, particularly when it's cold like this, like I say, the water temperature is 5 degrees, the air temperature is about 7, 8, something like that. So, so it's not bad conditions, but it's not conducive conditions to feeding. We're looking, if they were on natural feeding patterns, so on the buzzers, perhaps something like that, the water temperature would be a lot warmer, probably 8 to 10 degrees, maybe optimal, and then anything up to 15, I would say, is good feeding conditions for them, where you get active fly. When it's cold like this, and all they've ever known all their lives is pellets, and they get fished to, like you can see, there's 10 other anglers on the lake today, and that's common every day. So they're getting fished to a lot. They know what a fly is, but they're also not looking for natural food, so it's more about kind of looking for a trigger point, like what's going to get them going on the day. And you've got to believe in these kind of fisheries, they are artificially heavily stocked. Those fish are just roaming around, not knowing what to do all the time. And don't get me wrong, there'll be more fish in some places than others, but you've got to think you're on them all the time. It's not an upland hill tarn like in the Lake District where there's only 50 fish in the whole lake. A lake like this has probably got neck end of 2,000 fish in it. So you're always covering them, definitely. Yeah, there's definitely a few fish in this corner. So what we've got here in this corner is a bit of a feature in that we're at the deep end of the lake and the far end of the lake's the shallow end. So here in this corner, there's just another swirl out there. We've kind of got the edge of the shallow water coming into the deep, and I feel like they're just kind of swimming along that drop-off area, probably in. This time of year, I'm generally looking for 8 foot of water, something like that, because you find with the thermoclines, not that you get them so much on small waters, but 8 foot tends to be a relatively constant temperature, no matter what the air temperature's doing. So, looking for that kind of really steady temperatures, constant conditions, where they're probably not going to be in 2 foot of water when it's so cold. So there's definitely some here in this area.
We're having a little bit of a search around for these fish. It's not been as easy as we thought it was going to be. So at the moment, both of me and James are on sort of a couple of methods just to try and see what sort of level these fish are at in the water. So at the moment I've got a floating line on. I've got a couple of cormorants and a brass weighted olive damsel on the point. What I'm trying to do is search through the water column to see what depth I'm going to get the takes at. Every now and then I'm seeing the odd fish in the top layers of water, but at the same time the only fish I've caught has been a bit further down. So like I say, just searching for that sweet spot more than anything, and hopefully within an hour or so we can start dialing something in.
So when we're fishing, I generally like to stick to what I would describe as the rule of 5, and I think it probably sounds quite extreme to some people, but when we're fishing to a lake with a lot of fish in and they're being a bit finicky, they don't really know what they want, they're not triggering on anything specific, I'll either go for 5 minutes before I make a change, or I'll go 5 casts depending on how active the fish are. So if the fishing's a bit slower, I'll go 5 minutes, and then if there's a lot of fish activity, I'll only give it 5 casts before making a change. And I'm not talking drastic changes, I'm suddenly going to completely change method necessarily. It might be that I do 5 casts of medium style retrieve high in the water, and then the next 5 casts deep down, or I'll just change the fly pattern while still fishing the same method. And that change of colour or change of speed can often unlock an extra take from what they've already seen. Because a lot of these stock rainbows, they get very used to seeing flies, so they know which direction flies go into the bank and how they fish. If you can do anything that's slightly different to anybody else, that will often give you a little edge. Yeah, so we're coming up to 5 minutes of fishing the same thing. I've had a fish and a few follows on my fast intermediate, and at the minute I've got quite a big white minke on, because the water, as I say, is a little bit coloured. It's very visible. It's one I've tied myself, but it's using the Fulling Mill minke strips, the new micro ones, so they're a bit thinner. Just because, again, it's different. Everyone's using the standard big minkies, and I quite therefore like my Stillwater patterns to be a bit smaller. So I stuck to my 5-minute rule of 5 minutes change something, or 5 casts change something if it's going well and it's active. 5 minutes went by, change fly. Another 5 minutes went by, no interest at all. So I've had a complete change from fishing on the lures and the intermediates to fishing the indicator, or what we call the bung, just to give me a different presentation. Now fishing completely static, or mostly static, with flies at 3 and 6 foot deep. So 2 attract patterns, one's an egg, one's like a coloured worm. Again, I'll give it 5 casts with this. If nothing's happened, I'll either change the depth or change the colour of the flies, just because I know there's fish in this area. Like, we've seen them moving, I've been getting follows. The fish, the guy on the peg next to me to my left just caught one. Also fishing the bung, interestingly, so hopefully this is going to pay off and we'll get another fish on the bank. And one thing you might be able to see that I am doing with the bung, rather than just chucking it out and leaving it, I'm keeping in control of my fly line. So I've got a decent quality fly line that's not all coiled up, and that I'm trying to keep it relatively straight towards the indicator. And every so often I'll throw a mend in just to straighten everything out, but it also moves the flies, and then as I've mended and I'm now leaving it slack, the flies are dropping again. So I'm actually moving the flies quite a bit, whereas most people probably consider the bung to be chuck it out and just wait, like float fishing, whereas I prefer to fish it a bit more actively than that, and particularly at the minute when they're not really feeding, try and induce a take in by imparting some movement. And the same thing once it is drifting around in the wind like that, sometimes it can be good to just throw a little bit of slack into the line like that. So now I've put a little loop in the line, you can see, and I'll let the wind take up the slack, which means the bung's not moving. So one thing that's worth bearing in mind, like you can see here, my indicator's out in front of me, but I've got quite a big bow in my line. Like if I was to get a fish now and I strike straight up, I've got to move that line 15 feet till it's straight in front of me again, in which time I'm going to have lost the fish, I won't have set the hook. So if that indicator goes down now, I want to strike with my rod low, downwind, because that's the way my line's going. So if I was kind of going to demonstrate that now, if it went under, I want to strike across and down like that, rather than straight up. If I strike straight up, all I'm doing is picking up a load of slack line. I'm not actually moving the hook very much. Whereas if I strike across and down, then I'm moving the hook.
Okay, so I've just had a little bit of a move. I've gone to the bottom end of the wind, a little bit further up the lake though, and I've just got here. I've had about a 5 casts. I'm straight into fish. Back on the little minkies on the fast glass. I've got 2 of them on there. It's just with this wind sort of coming into us here, it just makes it a little bit easier to cast the 2 flies out, and it's on a shooting head as well. Getting that turnover a little bit better, and straight away I've caught a fish.
So we've moved off the dam, gone a bit quiet, changed through methods, wasn't really doing much, so good time for a move to try and figure something else out. Sean had come down onto this windward bank and he'd managed to get into a few. So I've come down to the same area, managed to get one on an orange minke kind of straight away, but then it went quiet again. So I've had a complete change of tactic now. I've tried to slow everything down. So I've gone on to the midge tip, where I can fish a bit slower. It's the Snowbee Spectre Pro. Midge tip's got a nice even sink rate of the tips, a 6 foot, kind of medium to fast, intermediate tip. And it's just, there we go, there's fish. Just fishing that bit slower, just letting it on the drop. And like we were talking about earlier, just keeping everything nice and tight on the drop. Not just letting it sink slack. And you see when I'm playing it now, just keeping the rod nice and low, stopping the fish thrashing around on the surface. So now's the interesting bit, because I've got my net set up for Phipps Legal Comp, so it is shorter than most. Oh, but he's come in lovely. Happy days. So when you're fishing like this, you always want to keep them in the water where possible. And he's fine there, just nice and safe. And we're going to release him. Good fish that as well. So I mentioned before about fishing to competition rules, and we do have a set of rules we have to abide by for any world level competitions or Europeans set out by the governing body FIPS. And in this case, that biggest difference was the net length. There's a maximum net length. I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but it's the exact length of that net set up as it is. So I like to fish exactly to those rules, even when I'm out pleasure fishing, just so I'm used to it. And I know when I'm fishing, my leader setups, everything works inside those rules, so that when I go to a competition, I don't get caught out by, you know, the net being shorter than it would usually be for me. But it does mean when I've got an 18-foot leader on at the minute. Again, that's just within. Oh, I've just had a take then. Just within competition rules, because the second main rule is that the leader can't be more than double the length of the rod. And I've got a 10-foot here. It's the Snowby Spectre Pro 10-foot 7 weight. It's a really nice, powerful rod, and I've loaded that up, as I mentioned, with the sink tip. But it means I can punch out into this wind. But it does make sometimes casting that long leader and that shorter net handle landing fish can be slightly harder than with a longer net. So when we're talking about FIPS comps, there are other rules around fly sizes. There is a gauge that we have to abide by, which we can maybe have a look at. But it's basically, it can be long and thin or short and fat, is kind of the basics of it. And the bead size can't be more than, they say 4 mil, but to actually get it in the gauge, it's 3.8 mil. So we do have some rules around the flies. They have to be made barbless hooks, which is absolutely fine by me. It's the best for the fish. I actually think you get a better hookup rate on a well-made barbless hook than you do on a barbed hook anyway, because they tend to be finer points. So I'm perfectly happy to fish barbless all the time. But there are those little things always, you know, floating around in the back of our minds, those of us that do fish competitions, just making sure that we are sticking to the rules as we fish. I did feel a little take on that last cast, so I'm just giving it a bit longer on the hang. I've just lifted it up, got my first dropper out, and I'm watching the tippet.
Right, Sean?
Yeah, Sean's in. Go on, Sean.
So just had a little bit of a changeover and sort of brought the flies up in the water. First cast, boom, fish. So that was worth the change. So I went back on the slow glass, a little olive minke, and again the small minke on the point. Before I was fishing it with a brass beaded minke on the point on the fast glass. So just brought it up ever so slightly, and straight away I caught a fish. So while the cameraman was changing the battery in the camera there, I just had another take, another fish to the point. Absolutely slamming take, another one in the net. So we're sussing this out now. We're getting dialed in.
Yeah, just not playing the fish too hard. Managed to get another take on the drop this time. And then when he's coming in, his head's up, you just come. Here, and he's raring to go. Fish probably around the 4 pound mark, so we'll just lower the net down, get him the right way up. And you can see if you play them hard, they go back easy.
Yeah, this one's on the dropper, which is another little olive minke, the same thing, sort of thing. Another great stamp of fish.
So we've been fishing a few hours now, and thankfully the rain's held off a little bit, and we've managed to get into quite a few fish, kind of very typical of the time of year really. They've been quite localised. There are fish around the fishery. There's definitely one area kind of where the wind's blowing into, where there's definitely more fish. And we've managed to catch on quite a few different methods really, just as proof that it's not one secret fly, one killer method. Now, I've caught most of mine fishing a midge tip with things like damsels and small worms. Sean, I think, has caught most of his on minkies and pulling tactics. So we've had a good varied day, really. But now the afternoon's kind of setting in and the sun's up, which is rare for this time of year. We've struggled a little bit to carry on catching, but generally it's been a good day.
So my conclusion for today, from what I've seen and the amount of action I've had, would be a lot of these fish are on the downwind bank, holding quite tight in, and they're liking the flies move slowly. A little bit of a mix up with that, but every now and then just do a quicker figure of 8. A lot of the fish are coming in at probably 2 to 4 foot, I would say. And yeah, most of my fish today have come on the fast glass or a slow glass, fishing small brass beaded minkies and also some unweighted ones. All in all, we've actually had quite a few fish considering the slow start. So yeah, it's been good.